All right, folks, welcome into another coronavirus quarantined version of I've Got a Theory with Henish Jason. I've got a special guest on today, Jason Sisneros. You may have seen him on the Bald Avenger podcast, but he's also a notable businessman. Jason, tell me a little bit about your companies and what you're known for specifically right now.
Well, I guess the short answer is that I think much like a lot of people, you start out in life and you just try to figure out how you're going to pay the bills. My beginning was I was adopted by a guy that really was a bad guy. We won't go into it here because it's not relevant. But at the end of the day, he ended up going to prison for trying to kill me and my mom when I was 17. And at that point in time, the things that I had learned was how to deal drugs, how to collect money. And so that was my first way of sort of taking care of myself. I got booted out of the house when I was 15 and been on my own ever since. And I think at the end of the day, we feel like, oh, I've got a job, I've got this. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're taking care of your family, and you're in that mode where you have to put a roof over your head and food in your belly, right? And so then that leads you on a path that sometimes corresponds with your abilities, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it takes you down a totally different path. What that did with me was ended up going into, after a long period of time, I ended up getting into my first business. And I did horribly at it. I crashed it. I went bankrupt. And then I thought, well, that's okay. Everybody fails once you're, in business. So I went out and got another one. I failed at that one, failed at that, another one. 3 in a row. I crashed. And what happens with a lot of us is in our psychology is when you do something over and over and over again and you continually fail at it, it messes with your psychology. And so I fell into a deep depression. That led me, the long story short is that led me to Tony Robbins. I ended up going to work for him, traveling around the world. I took my failures. I combined them with all of the amazing business people that I got a chance to be in front of because of my relationship to Tony. And I combined those into a process and a procedure, and then went into buying businesses for the purpose of not ever having to go out of business again. I didn't want to do that. And so I started buying businesses, built a system and a process that allowed me to purchase and hold in my portfolio at any one time 30 plus businesses, and that I wasn't running. And then I went from that to starting a consulting company to help other businesses, because that's right about the time that I was doing really, really well. I thought, this is my give back time. And so I started getting into philanthropy, and I realized that no matter how wealthy I became, I needed help from other people that were making money to be able to do the things that I was doing in philanthropy. Those of you that don't know, we do a lot of undercover rescues of little girls and little boys in the sex trade. I'm highly supportive in the domestic violence world because of my background. I'm also CEO of Feed a Billion, which was started by Ambush Jane and Tony Robbins. And we're heavy into vets and to anti-suicide as well. So what we did was we started a consulting company with the motto, we help good people make more money, get more time so they can do more good. And about 11 months ago, prior to this entire thing, I was fortunate enough to sell my companies, my entire portfolio, except for 3 of my businesses, and did that with the intent of going full-time into philanthropy work. And so now with all the businesses, doing what they're doing, my consulting company has come to the forefront to really help a lot of companies get through this time. So that's my background.
Wow. Yeah. So that's a great story. It's a really compelling story, and obviously that's where you're at. And there's probably a lot to be said about the breadth of experiences that you've had to give you that perspective that's helped in business, from rock bottom to everything, in interacting with Tony Robbins, multi-billionaire type, influential type person. And I'm a huge fan of his as well. I've been to a few of his events, including UPW and Business Mastery and stuff like that. So I've spent some time with him. I've got the CDs. I like the programs, and I believe in it. It's a really good stuff. But we wanted to get to a theory. And, I don't know if you want to pivot based on what you've talked about or what you've learned with Tony, but I know you've got a lot. And I know we've mentioned briefly prior to this recording that, we have some interest in government and how do we shape the way things go. And I'm going to play role reversal, because usually I'm asking the guest for a theory, but I'm pitching this one to you, and you tell me what you think of it. My theory is that we can't solve the self-interest and the politics in our politics and all the negative connotations that come along with it with humans. I don't think humans solve our problem. I think we keep replacing them with people that are self-interested in the short term for how to get reelected and how to pad their pockets, and then how to help their friends that help them get reelected. So it's this vicious cycle. And I don't think people solve that. I don't think even if you took the most noble, honest, integrity-laden person and put them in power, that they would do the exact right thing, because there's too many other forces in play. And I don't think that we solve this. I think that sometime in the future, I don't know if it's 10 years or 100 years, that AI potentially takes over and we just get to be a witness to it all. And then the governance of the planet is taken over by a higher level cognition that understands the overall goals of keeping spaceship Earth afloat throughout the universe with species on it, and we're not extincting ourselves faster than we can figure out how to explore the rest of the universe.
It's an interesting theory, and one of the benefits. I'm a history buff. I love history because you can glean so much from it. A lot of the path, like anybody that has worked, has come from rough times, and a lot of your audience, I guarantee you have, everybody's had a challenge in their life. And what I wanted to do was, when I crashed that third business, I decided and committed to the idea that I'm not going to do that again. That's very painful. And so you hear the thought process, learn from your, if you don't learn from history, you're destined to repeat it, which plays right into your theory, because you look back and I could go through multiple different things, but let's talk about the time that we're in right now, right, with COVID, and relate it to World War II, right? In World War II, what did you have, right? You had people you had one side where you had Hitler, and then you had the Allies. So you had the Axis and you had the Allies, and really Hitler was representative of what we are considering a virus that's in our world right now. And you look back and you see what happened. Neville Chamberlain with his appeasement tactics, right? He would he went, stop bombing places, Hitler, and Hitler would go, okay, I'll sign a peace accord. And then right after he signed it, he would go bomb somebody else and take somebody else over. He did it twice in a row. And both times Neville Chamberlain went back, and that was the transition into Winston Churchill, right? And while they were fighting the war and all this kind of stuff, and well, how is Hitler taking over all this stuff? They have a subpar military, Come to find out, they're all taking methamphetamines. He was feeding them meth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that they could go for 3 days at a time, so they could go faster, so that they felt like they were beasts. And you look back, and I was trying to relate that today on a radio show that I was on, where can you imagine Roosevelt and Chamberlain and all of the world leaders at that time, the French president at the time, and these guys being on Facebook going, oh, because you've got the two sides of what's happening now. It's a health scare, and you can't eat money when you're dead, right? And then on this side, you have, this is a hoax and this is nothing at all. And somewhere in the middle is a solution. But what would have happened is you have these people inside of their own country. This thing has slapped 7+ billion people in the face at the same time.
Yeah.
And rather than look back to history for some lessons of how we might deal with it, what we do is we go to our corners. Trump believes this thing, so I'm going to believe everything opposite of him. Nancy Pelosi believes this thing, so I'm going to believe everything opposite. And in there is all this human mess that you're talking about. Right. And they're fighting with each other. And if you imagine going back to World War II and seeing all these people on Facebook, and France is going, America, you're so stupid for thinking that we should kill Hitler. And America going, well, you're so stupid because you think we should just interrupt their food chain. And England chiming in going, well, you're both stupid because we should break the code. And this is, to your point, this is the mess of humans that take any sort of crisis and they look how they can leverage it. And what I've been doing recently is going to war with those people that are trying to shame people that are even asking questions, because that leads you into totalitarianism. That's the whole thing of being a fascist. And
Right.
all of it is to garner power and certainty. You've got the people that have power, have money, and what they're doing is they're utilizing it to separate people again. Okay.
Yeah.
So to your point, what if that statement says that if you don't learn from history, you're bound to repeat it? We have proven that we are dumb animals who cannot get past the point of learning the lesson that killing each other for power it only helps a handful of people, and they're using the rest of us like puppets.
Correct.
You can't get past that point. Now, let's go, okay, an AI, in other words, it's almost, and there's several different theories in this world, because I also play in the tech world, that tell you that if you were to program something that was magnanimous, right, and did the right things at all times, and then you handed that power over to it, what if that AI learned inherently, because it learned from us, what if it has embedded in it that same concept? Hey, I could create get rid of all of these viruses called humans, and just plug in a bunch of machines, and we're going to be just fine, right? We've got the sun, we've got oil, we've got water, we've got all of these things that we can resource ourselves with. So there's a scary side of what you're talking about, and also a hopeful utopian side.
Right. Absolutely. No, there is both aspects. There is the machines are going to take over, because we've watched Terminators 1 through however many they've made. And we know that vision, dystopian vision of the future exists, that the robots take over and they look at us like viruses. But one of the key things that I learned when reading the National Geographic on Earth Day, just the last few weeks that came out, was that prior to the Industrial Revolution, humans and humanity was a sustainable force, right? It was only when we started extracting and producing and creating materials that were non-degradable that caused the problem, right? When we started to have to pull oil out and create plastics that don't break down for thousands of years and ruin our planet, and pumping gases into the airs, that we never had those kind of issues in the past. And so it's only in the last couple hundred years that we've really done this to ourselves. So the thinking is that, is it possible to create a sustainable future? I think so. I think we're starting to see this with a lot of the more progressive European countries, where they're figuring out how to get to like a net zero type environment, where they're pushing away ICE, internal combustion engine cars, and saying that you can only buy electric cars. And if you have a car that's over 10 years old, you're going to get taxed up the wazoo because you're killing the planet type thing. So you're starting to see these more progressive policies come in the smarter, more progressive countries. And I use that term, kind of loosely, knowing that there's people that think, oh, they're not necessarily living the best way, but they're probably doing a little bit better than us, because we waste a lot of stuff here in America. And that's kind of where I'm getting at, is that earlier today I did a show with a buddy. We're talking about how college is becoming a luxury item, and I'm looking at how much the salaries are and the total compensation are for college administrators. There's hundreds of them that make $1 million or more a year. There's no reason that people that are associated with the nonprofit, associated with educating young adults, should be making $6 million a year. Right. So it just kind of goes to the point that if left unchecked, which pretty much every time it is, humans will become greedy and want the most money and most imbalance they can get out of gaming the system. And that's why smart people can take advantage of information asymmetry, take advantage of the financial literacy or business literacy or whatever other economic literacy they have that other people might not, to take advantage of it. And in this case, we're seeing media literacy in information literacy being exploited, so people that are in power can maintain that. And I don't know if that exists with a more magnanimous, type entity that could think for the benefit of the planet as opposed to the benefit of me and my rich friends.
Well, only thing that I would say to that is we got to make sure we got a kill switch, and that because I'm all for the idea that century after century, hundreds and thousands of years, that man has continually, look, we've advanced in a lot of ways. Right now is the best time on minus the COVID, right? But at the end of the day, even with the COVID, this is the best time. We have the lowest death rate. We have the highest expectation for babies to live. We have the ozone is actually, where it was expanding, is actually shrinking. We've got polar ice caps that are growing back, now because we've incentivized in our capitalist system, we've incentivized green policies, right? You're making sure the people that make the best solar panels, the people that make the best cars, right? People are socially conscious at a much higher level. So you're seeing that some of that can happen, but at the end of the day, you still have, this. I look to Egypt. Remember the spring, the Arab Spring.
Arab Spring,
right?
yep.
I look to that, and that gave me such great hope, man. That social media, like information, communication, those types of things. I know a lot of people think that it's evil and it's made us vapid, and which is true in some cases. But if we look at Arab Spring and how that completely transformed in what would have taken 50 years in the past, 100 years, if it was to ever happen, because information has always, the libraries, when we opened up libraries, when we commercialized the printing press, right? All of these things democratized information. The more information you get, the more education you have. And the more education you have, the better decisions you make. And so there's signs of humanity starting to get it right as a collective, and realizing that when people are playing you off of each other, that it's for their benefit, right? Yeah. It's for the elite. And I don't say that because to point a finger at anybody, but when you have senators that are there from the time they sign up to the time they die, that's not what our founding fathers had in mind.
No way.
They had in mind that you and I, guys that had businesses, right, would go and we would sacrifice, like
as a public service.
It was a sacrifice. Like right. we either had somebody that can run our business, or that thing went out of business, and we would have to do it when we got back. And we were going to go serve for a short amount of time and then go back to our lives and set no laws against ourselves. Right? That was the premise of the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson, the people that wrote our Constitution, which is by far and away the greatest document that's ever been written to advance humanity throughout history. Right? Because America, regardless of what you think of her, does a really great job when other people have crisis, right? And True. We go and we give them food, and we give them water, and we give them our money, and we do really great things as Americans because it's part of our DNA, and it's part of the DNA of the human nature. But other systems, because they're still totalitarianism and they're still socialist or communist in theory, which is good in theory, but it's really more about the top being in control, that you see that we keep penetrating with that freedom and that mindset, and the idea that me as a whole, I'm my own entity. You are your own entity. And as long as you're not impeding on my right to live, to breathe, and to pursue happiness, then we're good. We don't need all these government rules. We don't need all these regulations. And what would AI do? What could AI do is to say, look, we're going to all agree on a set of principles, and then let it learn from itself with an encoded, magnanimous, idealistic viewpoint, and then live under that theory. And anytime despots, and when I say despots, I mean anybody that rises to power, who usually uses safety and security as the key, right? Oh, Henish, you're scared. Put me in power, and guess what? I'll make sure I take care of you.
Right. Hey, that's what's happening with the mafia in Italy right now.
It's what's happened with the mafia from day one.
Right.
You want to talk about something I know something about, but at the end of the day, that is the and that is just, the mafia is just it's not the poor man's, but it's kind of the poor man's politics.
Yeah.
The president of any country, those people are the real mafia people, because they can actually, the mafia folks were really around taking care of their family and their community and their country. And yes, they had to do some illegal things along the way to do it, but minus being a rich person with a pedigree or the right last name, how else do you feed your family?
Yeah, for sure. So this brings up 2 points, with the AI. One is that there's a book I read a while ago called Superintelligence, written by Dr. Nick Bostrom, and he's the director of the intelligence department at Oxford. And the whole book is basically 7 different strategies to employ to prevent AI from becoming evil and taking over. So he's kind of already thought through this and game planned it out. But you mentioned the Constitution, which I think is exactly right. Effectively, optical computing is coming out right away, right? Optical, fast as light processing, which keeps our projection of how fast computers are getting faster. Keep going. Moore's law, right? It's going to keep going because we think, oh, we're going to reach the cap soon, but then all of a sudden they figure out a new way to do computers even faster, which indicates that the likelihood of machines getting so good at the Turing test and convincing us that they're just like us, or convincing us in a chat bot, or if you were some kind of, like drone person, might be convincing to me in a short period, right? And we're getting there, which brings up, if we could build some kind of coded in heuristics or laws like a constitution.
Yep.
That says, Mr. Robot, your goal is to make sure that we take care of food production properly. Mr. Robot, your goal is to make sure that we're not killing each other unnecessarily with chemical warfare or biological warfare. We're not doing these things that are going to affect the long-term health of the planet. It seems possible. I'm not saying it's necessarily possible, but it seems possible that outcome comes out. And I'll furthermore go with this theory is that it seems inevitable that a computer will become smarter than us and probably more trusted to take care of our planet than any human on this planet would be.
I'm with you, brother, but I'm sort of playing devil's advocate with you a little bit, which I like. But at the end of the day, the minute that a computer can compute as fast as the human brain, the next second we're pets.
Yeah, potentially. But the thing is, like, we're such wild cards. I think at least for the uniqueness of our thought, it's something there, right? Because you take 1 million people, you're going to get a couple hundred good ideas out of them, right? You take 7 billion people, you probably get a few good ideas out of them. Every once in a while, you get an Einstein, you get a Da Vinci, you get an Elon Musk, and even the next 1,000 people in orders of magnitude intelligence less than them are still valuable to society. And I think the contributions of the few can rise to the top of the population that do make a big impact in terms of advancement on the overall goals of spaceship Earth and all of our species that are on it.
I'm with you, but again, who builds it, right? Yeah. Now, because again, now you're talking about, okay, it's the Chinese. Are the Chinese going to have a kill switch or something that could say, we want to take over that portion, blah, 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 blah. If it's the Russians, right? If it's America, like, if it's anybody that's not like, okay, we take the best minds and the greatest philanthropic type human beings and you throw them into a room, that means, and here's why oil is still even being used. And this, it's only being used because of the power of the people that produce oil.
Right.
There's been battery driven, there's air driven, I guarantee you that at some point in time, somebody has figured out, the terms I'm missing it right now, but not fusion, not cold fusion, but
some kind of perpetual motion type thing.
Perpetual motion, right? So perpetual motion. I've known some people, right, that say, I got this, but I'm not telling anybody because I'll be dead, right? Yeah. So the idea is we hand over the keys to an AI for influence and power. Politics completely disappears because we don't need it anymore. That's a lot of powerful people that are going to be wiped out of a job. I'm just kind of, I love this discussion because I want to I'm a positive thinker. I think in terms of altruism. My life is I hope a reflection of altruism in motion. And I want to think that way, but I also come from the street and I've seen the bad side. And then I got into business and I've seen the bad side. And then I've been in politics and supported politicians seeing the bad side. I've been in philanthropy and seeing people the dark side of philanthropy where they're saying that they're raising a bunch of money for other people, but it's going to themselves. You see what I'm saying?
Right. It's hard to trust anyone, and I heard recently that that people, there's municipalities and cities and states in the US using drones to make sure that people aren't going outside. Guess where those drones are coming from? China. And so what are the odds that those are loaded up with some kind of, malware to be able to take the information? So it's hard to trust anyone at this point, especially with electronics. Like, I can't take my computer apart and know who's spying on me, but I can safely assume it's everyone and Facebook, so it's all there. This conversation goes on forever, but in the interest of time, I've kind of got to wrap up the segment. But I do want to do follow-ups with you, because I think this can go down a rabbit hole of just thought expansion, and that's the purpose of this podcast, is to get people thinking uniquely. Like, could AI take over in the future, and what does that look like? And if it does, are we doing the right things to kind of be prepared for it mentally, and is it even a potential output, knowing that our next best option is humans, and we're fallible. We make mistakes, and if left with power or absolute power, we will absolutely be corrupted.
Amen, brother.
Right.
I think it's a great conversation. I'm here. Willing to talk anytime, brother. Anytime.
Hey, Jason, thanks so much for joining me on the show. I'm going to wrap it there with another awesome episode of I've Got a Theory, this time with my special guest, Jason Sisneros. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode.